Welcome to the 12th episode of Why It's Awesome, the show where I attempt to take something often easily dismissed and explain why you maybe should give it a shot. The intention with this series is to help new fans find something they'll enjoy that initially they might have passed over, or so the people who are already fans can pass this video on to their friends to persuade them to give the subject in question a go. Now this time, our episode is going to be covering something that's been heavily requested and one I've always intended to cover as it's one of my favourite shows of all time. Avatar: The Last Airbender, as well as its successor, The Legend of Korra. Now trust me when I say, these are shows you should absolutely not dismiss, but I often find that whenever I recommend this show to my friends, which I often do with a great deal of enthusiasm, I hear the same complaints. The general consensus is, what? The Nickelodeon show. A couple of other people said they saw the movie and thought it was poor, so didn't bother with the show, which, for the sake of brevity, I'll just shoot down now and say don't let the movie knock your opinion of the show, since The Last Airbender movie is about as much a representation of the TV show as the Westboro Baptist Church is representative of all of Christianity. A few said they tried the first episode, but it didn't resonate and felt like it was too childish. And then the really odd one I get is people who say they don't like anime, don't want to watch it because they think it's anime, and the few friends I have who do like anime seem to dismiss it as fake anime, seemingly offended by the notion that Nickelodeon is trying to push this fake anime their way. Let me just address that last point first before moving on. There's a lot of conversation regarding both The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra as to whether they're anime for using the visual style associated with anime to tell their story through animation, or as to whether they aren't anime on the basis they are Western made, whereas most anime is made in Japan. Now I don't want to get into an argument as to whether they're anime or not, that isn't what this video is about. Label the shows however you want. I personally choose to label them as some of the best shows I've ever seen, and couldn't care less how their animation style is defined, and here's why you shouldn't care either. The Last Airbender tells the story of a world where the planet has split into 4 distinct nations: Earth, Fire, Water, and Air. Within these settlements are individuals who can manipulate their respective elements. Our story picks up with Aang, a young boy who resurfaces after having been missing for over 100 years. Aang is the Avatar, someone who is gifted with the powers of all 4 elements, and whose destiny it is to bring peace to the world. In the time Aang has been missing, the Fire Nation has become a dominant and oppressive force of war, and it's up to Aang and his 2 companions who discovered him, Sokka and Katara of the Water Tribe, to help him resolve the conflict and prevent a disaster. Korra, set years after the original, follows the story of the new Avatar, and deals with her struggle to cope with the burdening responsibilities that title carries. Both are fantasy stories, set in a fictional universe influenced by the principles of Asian myth and religions like Taoism and Buddhism. Which brings us nicely into discussing one of the things that makes Last Airbender and Korra so great. The setting of these shows demonstrates some of the most meticulous and brilliant uses of world building I've ever came across. Each of the nations has a distinct look and feel. Each of the elemental bending the characters use are based off of the moves of real martial artists, creating believable and fluid movement. For example, Earthbenders feel heavy and hard-hitting with their grounding in Hungar Kung Fu. Waterbenders feel delicate, controlled and dreamlike with their use of Tai Chi based movement, and Firebenders feel quick, fluid and striking with their Northern Shaolin type movements. The universe the narrative occupies is both one of the most unique and believable worlds ever put to television. The vast, stunning environments feel like places that could actually exist, intricately crafted with love and attention to detail. For example, the writers even went to the depths of establishing a postal system within the earthbending city of Amashu. This isn't a world that exists as a background to fight scenes. This is a living, breathing universe that's as much a part of the show as its characters. It even grows up with the show. When we see it depicted in Korra 70 years after the events of The Last Airbender, we see the same world, but now it's been affected by an industrial revolution, pairing natural scenery with large man-made architecture and paved roads for vehicles. Of course, the location is just one aspect of the show, and a good setting means nothing without a good show to sit on top of it all. Fortunately though, this deeply complex stage pairs wonderfully with the equally complex characters and story. Now, if you haven't seen either of these shows, you'd be forgiven for thinking what I, and most of my friends did, which is, this can't be good, it comes from a network that puts out shows like iCarly and Victorious. For the longest time, I didn't give the show a chance off the back of this notion, and when I eventually did give it a go after several recommendations, it took a few episodes to really get me going. But the slightly slow burn is worth it, because when the Avatar series hit, they rival anything else on television. Let's look at Last Airbender first. At first impression, I found a light-hearted and tropey show that looked cool, but I assumed ultimately wouldn't hold my attention for long. The first couple of episodes you can pick out the standard character formulas. Aang's the plucky young naive hero, the kind we're all used to by now, Sokka as the comic relief, Katara as the caring companion, and Zuko the villain is so one-dimensional he's practically an Asian stereotype, constantly shouting how he needs to catch the Avatar because it will bring him honour. What I never expected, especially of a show on Nickelodeon, is that these first impressions would quickly melt away as new information and develops were unveiled to a point where the characters become such sophisticated portraits of truly believable personalities and motivations that they feel like real people. Zuko, for example, without spoiling anything, did a complete 180 and went from being the thing I hated most in the show to my favourite character, as we see the relationship with his uncle explode and find out the dark reasons for his pursuit of what he calls honour. And make no mistake about it, this show does get dark. And not in the dark and edgy way that sometimes networks use to try and sell to kids, but more in the way that it covers very adult topics. This show, with its PG rating, actually delves into issues such as genocide, abuse, puppet politicians, spirituality, love, war, suicide, coping with death, loss of faith, and that's just to name a few. It never gets to the point where it's inappropriate or bogged down with ideas too big for it though. There's plenty of deeply satisfying action, and at its very base, it's completely family friendly. It just uses the story of superpowered elemental swinging teens on an adventure across the world to tell a tale about much bigger things. Korra's the same. What starts as a show about a young talented girl going into the big city to train in martial arts, chase after love and occasionally take part in pro sporting events quickly becomes a tale about how racism forms and evolves into extremism, the dangers of religious militancy, terrorism, and how the tolls of a life burdened with responsibility can slowly crack away at mental health and relationships. And although it suffers a little more in the character and narrative department than The Last Airbender in places due possibly to an unsupportive network, it is still well worth watching and even manages to excel above the original show in some areas, such as its jaw-dropping depictions of animated combat, added level of visual polish, and strong, exciting set pieces. All in all, I can't recommend either show enough, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't go any further in depth, but I implore you to at least watch the full first season of The Last Airbender, since I can almost guarantee by then you'll be hooked. I know I was. So that's it for now. What do you think? Did you enjoy this video? Let me know with a like, or maybe if you'd like to see more you could click the subscribe button. Is there something you love that other people just don't seem to get that you might want me to look into and see if I can't make a video about? Do you love The Last Airbender? Do you love Legend of Korra? Do you only like one, or do neither take your fancy? If so, why? What issues do you have with them? Leave a comment below to start a discussion, and thanks again for watching.